A woman in real love wrote to me and explained that she has lately been trying to teach her 4-year-old something that she, I think, read about, if I remember. She's using the alphabet as she teaches him the alphabet. So as she goes through A, B, C, D, she's using the letters as the first letter of words that are virtues. I thought, I've never heard of that. That's very cool. There's probably some book that does that. Instead of A as for apple, A is accepting, accountable. And she was wondering, is this a good idea? And, how do I do this? I think it's just, as the Brits would say, bloody brilliant. Wow. Loving and teaching kids is the key to everything. I can spend 2 minutes with a 12-year-old and I could tell you whether the parents loved and taught that kid. I mean, as in, well, less than 2 minutes. So at 4, is he too young to understand these principles? Oh no, they're really very smart. You can even see him pretend not to understand something. Well, you only pretend to understand something if you do. Very clever kids. But if you teach them with just the agenda to help them understand life better, they listen amazingly well. So, for example, she said, how would I teach accountable? So, to be accountable means to be willing to have other people see what you've done. If you've been given an assignment to do something, then you would be willing to describe whether you did it or didn't do it. If you hit your brother, it is accountable to say, yes, I hit my brother. Show them what an account sheet looks like in terms of money. In money, accounting simply means an accurate report, a demonstration of what has happened. Same in terms of human beings. It means to tell the truth about what you did. So show him. If he spills milk on the floor, show him what accountable and not accountable is. If he's accountable, he says, yes, I spilled the milk and I will be accountable. I will take the responsibility. I will tell the truth about it because it's mine to tell the truth about. And show him what not being accountable is. Oh, gosh, I don't know. Being accountable is reporting on whether your room is clean, whether your teeth are brushed. It's a very cool principle for kids to get. And they're kind of proud of knowing the word. So when a 4-year-old tells the truth about something and they say to somebody who's coming over to visit, oh, I'm just being accountable. They're not stupid. They're going to notice the expression on the adult's face when they use that word. Accountable at 4. Now, beyond accountability, if you feel like just going crazy, is responsibility. So this will also help him understand the difference between accountability and responsibility. To be accountable means, yes, I made that mess. I tell the truth about it. To be responsible, he also has to clean up the mess. So now he's accountable for his choice, then responsible for his choice. Telling the truth is just accountability. It's a lesser step. I knew a lady in real love many years ago. She was one of the first involved in real love, so it was a long time ago. She found a book in the library and read it, and it revolutionized her life. And then, for a variety of reasons, doesn't really matter what the reasons were, she became more and more difficult to talk to, more and more resistant. She would fight against explanations. She would refuse to be, as the 4-year-old is learning now, to be accountable. She became increasingly afraid, and then finally just snotty and angry. And she was taking it out on me because, well, I was talking to her, and it was easier to take it out on me than saying my life is miserable because I'm not being accountable. And it turns out that I learned recently that she has resented me for years for fill in the blank, whatever, being too this or too that, or too little this or too little that. But just the other day she wrote, and she said, last night I was at the casino and I won $348. Now I could have walked out with it, but instead, I needed it, but instead I kept playing and lost it all. I could have used that money, but no, it wasn't enough for me. I woke up this morning asking, why did I do that? Then I realized that I do that all the time with everything. Okay, this is an example of accountability. Nothing is ever enough with me. I want one more dessert. I want 5 more minutes in bed, even though I'm due at work. It's this wanting of more that has led me to exactly where I am now in my life. That's brilliant. You are wise to see this. Gratitude for what we already have is a state of mind and heart that very few people achieve with any consistency. And so the fact that you're beginning to recognize this is actually recognize it again, because I've seen you do it before. It's very cool. It takes a lot of guts to do. You continue. If I never have enough and always want more, then I will never be satisfied with what I do have. As long as I can't believe that $348 is enough, then $1 million won't be enough either. And surely $1 billion wouldn't be enough, right? Since I've actually counseled several billionaires, I can tell you that for a fact. They never, ever have enough. In fact, the richest people are very often the most consumed with protecting and expanding their financial holdings. You continue. I suffer because of my belief in lack and my desire for more, because my belief in lack fuels my desire for more. All of these years, after all of these years, I'm on the fringes of understanding that the illusion of not having enough is the cause of all my suffering. Real love principles came and smacked me on top of the head. How many times did you say to me directly, it doesn't matter how many people don't love you. It only matters that one does. I would call you and I would complain that this person wasn't nice to me, or that person wasn't nice to me, or this person didn't like me. And you would say, it doesn't matter. Do you have anybody who does love you? And it's taken me a lifetime to understand how much gratitude changes everything. When I'm grateful, I can't complain or be afraid or be irritated or blah, 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 whatever other unpleasant thing. A lady called me today and was talking about how somebody was saying terrible, horrible, defamatory, she called them slanderous things about me, and spreading them as far and wide as she possibly could. And I said, well, how long have you known me, honey? She said, well, at least 2 years. I said, in all those 2 years, have you ever seen evidence of my doing what that woman has said that I do? Well, no. Well, then you're going to have to make up your mind. Have you ever heard me lie to you? Ever? In 2 years? No. She said, well, but she's slandered. Doesn't that bother you? No, not really. I probably wouldn't, choose it on a box, Would you like somebody to speak nicely of you or slander you? Slander me. No, but I know who I am. I know what I have. I'm grateful for who I am and what I have. And while I'm in the midst of gratitude, pretty hard to whine about what I don't have or what somebody is supposedly doing to me. You continue. I can see now that the JFR was the governing factor for what follows. That meaning what follows as in EJFR, that judgment caused feelings and reactions. I didn't know that my J was governed by a belief in scarcity, that scarcity was my judgment. And that judgment is not your fault. You were taught it from the time you were a little kid. Remember, I know how you were raised in a household where on many days the rats ate more than you kids did. It was a terrible place, awful. So you were taught that scarcity was the rule and that scarcity would always injure you. But you're right, now only you can change it. With help, sure, but only you can trust that there is a better judgment. That's a big thing I just said. Sometimes you don't even have to trust what the better judgment is. Just trust that there is one, which then promotes you to ask what a better judgment is and motivates you to accept one. People who cling, who have a death grip to their old judgments, they don't ask what a better judgment is. They just keep using their old judgments to justify their present feelings and reactions. Now, their old judgments do explain their present feelings and reactions, but no amount of lying justifies unproductive and unloving feelings and reactions. You continue. If I expect 12 roses and get 11, then the 11 isn't enough. I get the field of death thing now. Finally, I'm getting it more powerfully than ever before. It's like, duh. Well, don't be too hard on yourself about the duh. Sometimes it takes a while to give up old beliefs. After all, we were taught them first. So they became in our minds law, eternal, irrevocable law, unquestionable. Who knew that they were nearly all wrong? It was a really stunning realization for me the first time that I realized that nearly all of us are taught nothing but lies from birth on. Well, no wonder our lives get screwed up. No wonder we become afraid. No wonder we then spend our lives protecting ourselves. Because we were taught wrong judgments. After all, everybody else believed them, right? So if everybody else believes a wrong judgment, how could it be wrong? Well, because it still is wrong. No matter how many people espouse a wrong belief, the entire world believed the world was flat for the longest time. That didn't make it flat. You say, loving someone without faith is like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. And I was the leaky bucket. I didn't know. I feel like I'm beginning to understand all the real love principles that previously I got only in my head. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface after all these years. Many of you have been studying and attempting to apply real love for many years. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's more that I didn't know, or there are more dumb things I'm doing. Well, the only thing we can do is learn. And every day you discover that the surface was deeper than you thought. You just keep going. There's one layer after another. So just don't quit. The other day, just for fun, we're very often too busy to do this, but the other day, on a Friday, I think, I just labeled the day Donna Day. And I said, you can do whatever you want to, all day long, anything. So she described what she wanted to do, and that's what we did all day. And somebody wanted to speak to me that day, and I said, oh, you haven't heard? The post office is closed, and all businesses are closed. It's Donna Day. She laughed, and she said, so is there a Greg Day? Does there need to be? This is how partnership works. Donna Day was my gift, not a trade so that I would get my day. Besides, when I give an entire day to my partner, you think I don't enjoy it? that's what a partnership is. You don't trade. You just enjoy each other. Here's a mother who was never loved as a child, and she married in order to feel loved, which is, well, the reason why 99+% of marriages happen, is so that we'll lock somebody's love in. But the husband never loved her, and so she was left devastated. She didn't even realize she was marrying him to get loved, and didn't even realize that he wasn't loving her. She just knew that her life was getting awful. Her marriage was falling apart. He had multiple infidelities. She's been endlessly frustrated by trying to raise her children. I mean, it's just like, just nightmare. Endless pain. So I suggested some things that we talk about here on the video chat every week, that she find love in her life, that she trust it, that she remember it, that she learn to share it. Same advice to everybody, pretty much. I mean, lots of variations on the theme, but that's the basic pattern that we follow. And she wrote, and she said, this is not working, and I don't know how to do this. She said, my son, whose name is Julius, who's, I don't remember his age, but something like under 10, if I remember, is trying to get a reaction out of me, I think. So remember that to this point in his life, he has seen that he can get you to do whatever he wants. Effectively, he has learned that he's stronger than you are, and actually by quite a bit, by manipulating, whining, complaining, whatever. And now you're trying to do something different, so he's determined not to let that succeed. He would actually prefer to feel loved, but he doesn't know that consciously, and he doesn't trust you at all that you can do it. So he gets what he wants rather than what he needs. I can't remember if I've told this story, but whatever. I was on Skype with this woman one day when she called to this kid up one flight of stairs and said, Julius, come here. And he said, like I say, I think he's 9 or 10. He said, in something like this tone, you've got legs, you can come up here. I couldn't stop laughing inside. I could just picture one of my kids saying that. I could just picture one of my kids being in the room when he said that. And lock him in the closet so he wouldn't be killed. What he wants is to feel loved. But because he doesn't, and he doesn't trust you, what he does instead is manipulate you and jerk you around and get a sense of power from telling you no and stick your head in the toilet and use your own legs to get up here. You continue. I try and hold his hands and stay there with him, and he just jumps off the bunk bed and locks himself in the bathroom. I know he's partially acting mad. He just ran downstairs and took off outside. I'm feeling pushed away, incapable, and near tears. And that, my dear, is the problem. You just said it perfectly. You're making all of this, the raising of your son, about you. You said, I'm feeling pushed away. I'm near tears. This isn't about you, hon. You're the mom. It's about your son, Julius. Don't take this as me yelling at you, because you have a tendency to do that. You feel yelled at by your husband, by your kids, by anybody who would describe to you something that you're doing that's ineffective. But you don't know who you are. You have no clue. You're not certain of being loved, so unconsciously you need his love. A 10-year-old who's your son, you would take love from a passing dog. You are desperate for his approval. So anything difficult that he does, you sense as disapproval. It puts you into a tailspin, and then you're useless to him as a mother. He needs a strong, loving mother. He doesn't have one. So what does he do? He establishes his own rules and his own world, and he raises himself. And it's a nightmare because he sucks at it. He's 10 years old. He doesn't know how to raise himself. He doesn't know how to love and teach. So what's the solution? You can't skip the steps. Find, trust, remember, share. You have to feel loved yourself. For now, you could trust my love for you. So you can have a parent. I'm not joking. You have to have a loving parent. Then perhaps you can feel God's love more. Then you can be a whole human being capable of loving this kid. Until you do that, this kid is doomed. He lives in a world of utter chaos. No criticism of you. This is what you were taught to do. But when you and I talk, the stakes are nothing less than the life of your children, not to mention your own life. You continue. I decided to just let him be. I wanted to cry. Then another kid got upset about something small, and I wanted to yell and tell him I was doing my best, but instead I just went in and held him. Well, closer. That's what they need. But it's not just the holding. If you felt like crying and you went in and held him, I can guarantee you that part of the reason you did that was so that you would feel held. They need to feel your utter calm and confidence. And until you feel loved by a parent, they really just can't. You say, it was so nice to just hold him. And then the third child came in and wanted to be held too. Even though things have turned out relatively well, I feel empty and alone. Yes, which is proof of what I was just saying. A big part of you held these two kids because you needed comforting. And that's devastating. It doesn't help you heal your wounds. Little 8 and 10-year-old kids can't heal you. And they sense that they're being used. So as soon as the holding's over, they're back to whining and complaining and controlling and manipulating. You do feel empty and alone. And I'm right here. There are other people who can love you too. You're kind of creeping up on the idea of trusting me, but you need more than creeping up. I talked about it last week, I think, when I talked about riding a bicycle. The slower you ride a bicycle, you'd think, gosh, if I go slower, I'll be safer. No. Bicycles have to be moving a certain speed before you can keep them upright. What you need here is to move fast enough. You need to take a bigger leap. You say it's like, I will never be enough. And right now, you're weak enough in the ability to love that you don't have enough. It doesn't mean you're not enough, but you don't have enough. So as you accept feeling loved, we can eliminate your fears, and you'll discover that who you really are is enough. You conclude, saying, mustering up the motivation for the rest of the day seems like a mountainous task. I can promise you, kid, that if finishing the day seems like climbing a mountain, you drag around with your face on the floor and your kids feel it. So you come across as depressed and empty and weak. So then the attention you do give your kids, this may sound crazy, but it doesn't count because they discount you and they discount everything you give because it comes from a place of weakness. You say, sometimes I want to just crawl into my bed and have it all go away. I have like 8 hours to do a science project, plan a lesson that I have to teach kids at church, cook lunch and dinner, finish cleaning my house. And that doesn't even include all the things I want to do or feel like I should be doing, like picture albums and journals with my boys and exercising and doing something fun with the kids today. I get it. There's a lot to do. I've been there. And all of that is nothing compared to you putting your hand on your chest 20 times a day and remembering what it was like when I loved you, when you were here. To remember that God loves you, that you are enough to do everything you really want to do. If you feel like crying and you feel like you're climbing a mountain, nothing you do, you'll get things done. You get things done, but you won't affect people in a loving way. And there isn't a single task on earth that you're going to accomplish that's more important than the power of loving another human being. In this case, your own kids. This is a different subject, but kind of linked to the one we just talked about. Um, so, here we are. I was talking to a mother who was describing that her child doesn't feel loved and is afraid of the fact that the world is in chaos and that the world is filled with panic and something has to be done. What do you do with a kid like that? You can only control your own world. And if the child doesn't see you in control of your own world, the child has absolutely no idea what it would be like to feel peaceful in his. So he would then worry about reading in the newspapers about terrorists and worried about civil war and worried about volcanoes and hurricanes and all that stuff. And in the child's fear, what does he do? He does whatever makes him briefly feel better. Ignores you, fights with you, and you tend to allow it, which confirms to the child that he is in charge. This is a child who feels an enormous sense of entitlement to electronics, to everything else that he sees his friends doing at school. And I see this now everywhere I go. Entitlement might be the fastest growing disorder, disease, problem that I'm presently seeing in children. Parents are terrified of the disapproval of their kids. And so children feel utterly entitled to do and to have whatever they want. Their iPhone becomes 6 months old, they want a replacement, and they pound their fists on the table until they get it. So they use electronics and sex and drugs and porn. There was a recent study that demonstrated that, and I knew this was common, but I was a little surprised by the degree to which it's become common. They surveyed 1,500 or so, a bunch, of kids who are in their early 20s. So these are kids who have, gone through adolescence and they're fairly fixed in what they believe is good and right. And 19 of 20 kids in their early 20s now accept as normal. They see no moral problem with porn. Porn is one of the most addictive substances on earth, possibly more than cocaine, possibly than any drug. And now 95% of kids see it as okay. They're absolutely unprepared for what it's going to do to them. Functional MRIs have demonstrated that it actually distorts their brains, that it affects their relationships, it affects their happiness. It's destructive, and yet they see it as normal. And therefore, because they see it as normal, and they have parents who are weak, they feel entitled to use it and would resist any parent's attempts to teach them otherwise. There was a National 4-H Council survey recently among 1,500 kids, again, grades 9 through 12, and they found that 88%, follow me, 88%, so 9 out of 10 kids say that they have the capacity, the intellectual and social capacity to lead others, as in the country, in solving issues like affordable education, job creation, war on terrorism. This is a reflection of serious ignorance and profound entitlement. They really think that they can be adults. Why would they? Because they had to be. Because their parents weren't strong enough to love them and teach them, and so temporarily their solutions seemed to work. So you've got a kid who's directionless and 19 years old, no sense of what he wants to do in his life, but he can eliminate all of his pain using him or her, electronics, sex, drugs, porn, and so because they're relatively painless and their parents are supporting them, they feel entitled not only to the things that they use to diminish their pain, but to make their own decisions. In fact, to lead the world with their decisions. Now, to show you the absurdity of this, these kids who think that they can solve education and political problems, picture now, they're going to modify the way education is done, and they're going to solve worldwide political problems. These are the same kids who were studied in an extensive survey done by National Geographic. They were studied about their knowledge in an area that would impact both education and solving political problems. Why am I doing this? I'm telling you this so you can understand, as parents, how crazy it is to allow children to make decisions they're not ready for. So 9 out of 10 kids are ready to run the world, but out of these brilliant children who are ready to run the world, 65% couldn't identify Iraq on a regional map. This is a country that we've had really considerable involvement with, and in which many hundreds of people have died, and every kid in the United States should be able to identify. 65% could not. 9 out of 10 kids missed Afghanistan, which is even bigger. Oh, this is the one that gets worse. This is at home. 5 out of 10, 50% of kids couldn't identify the state of New York. New York's not a little state. Or Mississippi, also not a little state. These kids who are ready to fight the war on terrorism, 75% didn't know that Indonesia is predominantly Muslim. So they're going to fight a war on terrorism, and not all, but the majority of the terrorists that we hear about and see come from countries that are Islamic. And the greatest population of Muslims in the world is found in Indonesia. 75% of them didn't even know that. That was the predominant religion. So without knowledge, now this doesn't just apply to geography, this is really important for parents to get. Without knowledge, kids believe they are competent and in control. Why? Because nobody in their whole lives ever was competent and loving and guiding. So that left them to figure it all out, to be in charge, to eliminate their pain, to make their own decisions. So naturally they assumed, because they were surrounded by incompetent adults, that they were competent because they were allowed to make these decisions. What a phenomenal error, and what a horrifying tragedy. As parents, we have to see that it's our job to love and teach our kids. The longer we wait, the harder it gets. I talk to parents every day who are trying to teach these principles to their 3-year-old, and they encounter difficulties. But if they persist, what turns out is 2 and 3 and 4-year-old kids who are loved, loving, and responsible, which means they're happy kids. If you wait till they're 14 or 15, oh my, it becomes significantly, in fact, exponentially more difficult. Loving and teaching, it's the whole key to parenting. I know a lady in real love who's a classic addict to drama. I've been helping her see how she does it pretty much all the time, as in all the time. Everything is big. These are some of the characteristics of people addicted to drama. Every cold is big. Every menstrual cramp is the end of the world. Every difficult interaction is mutilating combat. People who are addicted to drama exaggerate everything. Everything's horrible. But then if something goes really right, then everything is really wonderful, wonderful, super, 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 too. Everything's exaggerated. Weight loss becomes an eating disorder. Drama and everything. It helps people to feel alive. Drama does. When they have nothing else. If you've got no life, if you don't have unconditional love in your life, and you feel dead inside, well, create drama. And they also do it so that they can avoid all of the responsibility associated with life. If your hair is on fire, like as in literally, nobody will ever come and ask you if you cleaned your room. And this is what addicts to drama learn. The more dramatic they are about everything, nobody will ever say, well, by the way, did you do that thing that you agreed to do yesterday? Because the addicts to drama are too busy screaming and yelling and bemoaning their terrible, awful fate. So here's the lady writing to me who is an addict to drama, and she says, today I spent some time with my niece, Lucy. We've always been kindred spirits. You can probably guess why. Yeah, I was kind of already guessing about that time. So I just watched her. She was always performing, always making projects up that were too big for her to accomplish, and always an excuse. Well, she could complete it if only she had blank. It was always somebody else's fault. So everything was always just out of her reach. Then she could get it done. She was obsessed about famous musicians, obsessed with serial killers, just to see the look on the faces of the adults around her. She would take classes that she wanted to take, but that were not compatible with the curriculum that enables you to graduate from high school. She took art and fun classes, knowing that she couldn't graduate when the date came. She would go on, dramatically hating a teacher for doing something that she didn't like in class, not wanting a job because of the starving artist persona that she created, but exhausting herself trying to make it work instead of just working. An intelligent girl, above and beyond most, but lost in a web of illusion. All of this is really pretty important because this is a drama addict describing another drama addict. Oh, they can use clearer terms even than I would use. And it's horrifying to her to see it in somebody else. She says, my niece is always jumping from one fantastic idea to the next with huge creative wings, but she can't get off the ground. That's a really nice metaphor. Huge creative wings, but never lifts off the ground long enough to feel what it's like to soar. And then she ends by saying, yeah, I got the point. I saw that I'm her. That's the beginning. When we see our addictions, we don't have to feel bad about them. We don't need to beat ourselves up. We don't need to have somebody tell us we shouldn't. We just need to see our addictions, feel loved, and gradually, because we're just good people, we will engage in our addictions less and less. We just will, because we'll see that it's more fulfilling not to be in the prison of addiction. Here's a man who says, I'm a grown adult man, I'm 72 years old, and I thought I was of sound mind. I just recently lost my wife, like less than a year ago, my wife of 29 years from cancer. I consider myself of strong mind, body, and morals, and really have never been weak at living and managing life's challenges. This challenge has proven to be way more than I was prepared for, the death of his wife. It left me weak, frightened, and running scared, and I'm not sure why. We planned well for the future, financially and in other ways. She was a strong person and did make many decisions in our relationship with me, giving some or equal input. I've managed well in picking up the slack from her transitioning, but sometimes I just can't seem to deal with this indescribable emptiness. So this might be hard to comprehend. The truth often is. Your emptiness partly stems from her loss, but also from a lack of unconditional love in your life that began way back in childhood. If you listen carefully to your description of your partner who died, there's not much in there about love. It's about the two of you working well together as functional business partners in a marriage. And this is really very common. Many people have said to me, well, we've never fought. But then I ask a few questions and it turns out, well, you've never talked either. So you got along, you solved problems together, and being married temporarily dulled the pain of your emptiness. But now that she's gone, and her direction and her strength, now you're feeling the emptiness that you had from the time you were little. Until we feel loved unconditionally, we can only know pain and fear, which is what you're describing, both your emptiness and your fear. So what do you do about it? If you go to the website, there's an entire section on how to find real love, and there's at least 10 items that I can think of. You start down that list. You start the process of finding unconditional love in your life, and you'll see many resources about that. And then as you grow, you'll learn to trust the people who love you and to remember it and then practice sharing it with others. Why would I leap to the conclusion that you are insufficiently loved? Because I've known people who have felt unconditionally loved. And when they have lost their spouses, it did not leave them feeling empty and afraid, as you are feeling. You're just feeling the final fruits of having not been unconditionally loved all of your life and having just temporarily had your pain dulled. You continue, I met somebody shortly after her passing, and I've gotten very attached to her. My mind is so confused that I keep pushing her away from me and then pulling her toward me. There are many circumstances around our relationship. I don't know exactly why I mention this. Maybe because she suggested that I order a CD set of Real Love and Dating to try and make heads or tails of this new relationship. She believes strongly in real love. Well, she's a smart lady, honey. Without real love, genuinely loving relationships are impossible. We can work as hard as we can, but without that one ingredient, we can't feel fulfilled. You and your now deceased wife managed to get along, but you didn't feel fulfilled. How do we know? Because now that she's gone, you're empty and lost. The fact that you push and pull this present partner is more evidence that you don't quite know what unconditional love is. That you settled for a marriage that was okay, that was satisfactory, that worked, that functioned all right. This is no criticism of her. But it wasn't unconditional love. Nobody's fault, not blaming you, not blaming her. You conclude, the real need for me, I think, is to understand how to manage this lonely and empty feeling that keeps knocking at my door. I know I'll never be able to make a good decision about anything that involves emotion and love if I don't resolve or understand this feeling. I've never been one to cry, and now I cry all the time. I'm open to thoughts and ideas. Well, bless you. To be open at 72, most people close their minds at age 4. Very few people are willing to deal with the pain in their lives that comes from a lack of real love. That is the feeling that you're describing. So start with the webpage and go from there. It is never too late to learn. A lot of courage on your part. I know a lady in real love who has, in recent months, started a real love group. She said one guy in group got defensive about the idea that unconditional love exists. It really upset him. And I think he wanted more proof from me because he stated categorically, it does not exist. Well, of course he doesn't believe that it exists. He has never felt it. So it's entirely understandable that he wouldn't believe it. In fact, that's exactly what I would have said to him if I'd been in the room. You continue. So how the heck can you explain that to somebody who doesn't believe in it? Well, just like that, just like I just did. I do it often. I'll give you another example. I say, of course you don't believe it. You've never seen it. You've never felt it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You've never been to Alpha Centauri, the star, either, but it exists. You've never seen ultraviolet radiation, but it exists. But I can tell you this. I have personally felt unconditional love many times, more times than I can count. So I can tell you that it exists. I'm not suggesting that it exists. I'm not saying I believe that it exists. It does. It doesn't matter what anybody says. I know that it does. So now the real question is not whether it exists, but whether you're willing to do what it takes to find it and feel it. And, by the way, I have absolutely no agenda about which way you go, whether you go to look for it and find it or you don't. The lady who's starting the group sent a second email to me. She said, whoa, he just sent me a 2-page email responding hatefully with one long intellectual objection after the other. He just went on and on and on and told me how wrong I was. And so what do I do now? Leave him alone. It's pretty clear after 2 pages of justifications and attacks that he can't imagine real love because he's never seen it, and he's so intellectually stuck in his head that if he can't see it or understand it or measure it, then it doesn't exist. Oddly, he's kind of created a world of his own, and he's the God of his own world, and he defines what is true and what is not. So pretty hard to fight against that. You're just an interloper in his world, and he doesn't really want to hear you explain it anymore. He simply wants to be right. So you just don't respond and you let him be right. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he wrote again to tell you that he's right, because he wants you to argue with him. He enjoys the arguing. He's never felt loved, and so the arguing feels pretty powerful because, well, he's good at it. I know a woman who's in a relationship with a huge victim. The man just bleeds victim. I've tried to reach him myself. Nothing. Impossible. He blames her and the world and his job and the weather and politics and me and whoever else is on the horizon for everything in his life. Well, she lives with him. She's his partner. So she's racked with just pain and fear because he just goes at her all day long. I mean, everything's his fault. He requires that she plan the day, and then if she makes a mistake in the planning, if anything goes wrong, it's her fault. If she says, well, why don't you plan the day then? Well, then that's her fault because she's refusing to participate in the relationship. In other words, she can't win no matter what she does. So I said, it was a real question, why do you stay in a relationship that's this terrible? She's not married to him, she's just been with him for a while. And she said, it took her longer than this, I'm kind of distilling what she said. She said, well, I'm afraid that I haven't done enough, and that if I leave, I'll look back and go, wow, if only I had done more, then the relationship would have worked. She was afraid that if she left, that he would have nothing because he was miserable and alone before she came along. And she's afraid that if she leaves, that he'll go right back to sitting on the couch and doing nothing and drinking and being miserable. She's afraid that he might actually be learning real love, but that maybe she's missing it. I said, what would possibly lead you to conclude that he's getting it? She said, well, the last couple of days, he's been nice to me. Yeah, that's called the wife beater syndrome. Man beats his wife, he's been doing it for years, and he packs up her clothes to leave, and he gets roses, and he kisses her, and he says, oh, I'm just so sorry, I'll never do this again. So all it is he's sensing that you're getting ready to bolt, and so he's been nice for the last couple of days, and as soon as you say, oh, I'm so sorry, I would never leave you, then he'll go right back to what he was doing before. In fact, I can predict that at 100%. That sounds arrogantly certain. But see, he hasn't learned any principles that would actually change the way he behaves or the way he feels. So once he has you back in the fold, so to speak, he'll go right back to beating you up, but in this case, emotionally. So he'll always be just sorry enough to keep you there. And I would suggest another fear that she didn't describe. And I told her, I said, you'll be afraid that you will be seen as the one who abandoned him while he was really trying hard to get it. But just when he was right on the verge of having a breakthrough, poof, you dumped him. And kind of another one that's associated with this, you want him to do some really terrible thing, like, I don't know, hit you, get put in jail for drunk driving. You want him to do something terrible that makes your decision to leave obvious and easy. And when I said that, she, in tears, said, yes, that's what I want. We want it to be somebody else's fault. And if we've got a particularly unloving and victim-y partner and we can't take being with them anymore, we just can't take being the one who's blamed. Because you know the victim will then take out an ad on the front page of the New York Times and tell everybody that you're an awful, hateful person. It's up to you, honey, but he's not going to do something that's going to make this easy for you. He loves the arrangement he has. He has a companion to be around so he doesn't feel lonely. He has somebody to cook his food. He has somebody to travel with. He has somebody to have sex with. He has somebody to listen to his stories. He loves your company. He loves blaming you because you let him. He loves making you feel guilty. And you allow all of it. And notice that the real reasons that you stay in the relationship, you didn't mention the word love once. You stay for, at the very least, 4 distinct and powerful fears. Fear is not the basis of a relationship. So I pointed this out to her just so that she could see that she was staying out of fear. I didn't tell her to stay or leave, but her relationship's based on absolutely nothing. And now she's going to have to decide whether she's willing to stay in a relationship where all she gets is emotionally beaten up and where she's motivated by fear. Her choice. It's always our choice. Here's a mother of a 3-year-old who if I remember, this conversation happened by text. I was doing something else and she was texting me. She said, he's just dumped toys all over the house. Well, the kid's a naturally messy kid anyway, and so when she says all over the house, it must have been extraordinary. So she said, essentially, he took out every toy he's ever owned and it's scattered all over everything. She said, what do I do? Well, my first inclination was, where were you when he was dumping the toys all over the house? He couldn't have been doing it quietly, but it was too late for that. I said, well, this is easy. Just tell him he has to pick them up. Now, pretty much all of my grandchildren started picking up their toys, like reliably, and putting them back where they belonged when they were, 12 to 15 months old. This is a kid who's 3 years old. In fact, almost 4. Tell him to pick them up. If he can pull them out, he can put them back. Kids are way smarter than you think. They don't need any encouragement or help in taking something apart or scattering stuff. When you tell them to put it away, they're geniuses. They look at you quizzically like, what do you mean? They know exactly what you mean. She texts back, I told him to put the toys away. Now, follow this. This is an adult human being. And she says, he refused. I wanted to put one of my children on with her. I wanted to just call one of my kids and say, would you please call this woman and tell her how to handle this? He refused at 3. I've had CEOs of corporations call me and say, we do not know what to do. Our child rules the house. Nobody has any peace. He makes all of his own decisions, criticizes everybody else, and we just don't know what to do next. Well, how old is your child? 4. So here's a CEO who can run a corporation with 1,250 employees, but is terrorized by a, 4-year-old. So she said he refused. And I said, well, put him in the harness. I had already taught her this trick. These little harnesses that you'll see kids in malls with or out walking in a public park. Actually, exactly like a dog harness. It's just made for a kid. And it's so that the kid doesn't run off in public and get lost or hurt himself. It doesn't hurt them. Fits them beautifully. They're padded, and all it does is keep them in check. And I said, so you put him in the harness, and then you fasten the harness to something high in a way that he can't move. He can't walk away from whatever you fastened it to on the wall. Why? To hurt him? Oh, please. The harness can't hurt him. I mean, he could just hang in the harness and it wouldn't hurt him. Like a seatbelt. We don't feel guilty about putting a seatbelt on a kid. So the reason is he'll hate it. He will hate being restricted. That's the whole purpose of a consequence. And then what you do is you just walk out of the room. You walk out of the room for, 30 to 60 seconds. And then you come back in and you check on him and just say, oh, I just came back in to see how you're doing. And you smile. In fact, you even laugh. Oh, so you're still in the harness. Oh, that just really annoys a 3-year-old because they're trying to manipulate you with their crying. And if you're not manipulated, it's really quite annoying, which is the whole point, right? It's something that they really don't like. And then you just keep asking him if he's ready to put away his toys, and you keep checking on him. It never hurts them, but they have to hate it. She texts back. He's in there screaming still, and it's upsetting me. Yeah, well, honey, that's why he's still screaming, because he's succeeding in doing what? Upsetting you. Every time you go in, you have an upset face, and so he goes, oh, I'm winning. Every frown or grimace on your face, unconsciously, this isn't intentional, he's going, okay, I've just about got her. If I keep the screaming up just a little bit longer, she'll give in and she'll put the toys away. So you just go in from time to time, say hi, and leave. She texts me back. He quit crying. I said, how long did it take? I could just see her hanging her head as she texted, 3 minutes. I said, so you just taught him an important life principle in 3 minutes. She said, now what? I said, let him out of the harness. But remind him that he goes back if he's not cleaning up. She texts back, well, he's moving intentionally slowly. Like they're not geniuses. I said, then you put him back in the harness. You tell him he has to go faster, but you can't be upset. She texts back. He's back to working, but he's not listening to my suggestions about how to put the toys away more efficiently. And now the 2-year-old is screaming. His sister, no, honey, now you've lost it. You've gone from teaching to controlling. No 3-year-old understands efficiency of putting the what she was upset about was the order that he was putting them away in. Large toys, then little toys, and on the right shelf. Oh, who cares? And because you're afraid, it's spreading, your fear is spreading to the 2-year-old, and now she's screaming. So the problem is not the kid, not either kid. The problem is you, that you're not being calm. 3 minutes later, she texts and says, everybody's happy now. There's no more screaming and he's putting the toys away. She said, but I'm kind of hurt that you said I was the problem. Jeez. I said, you're doing exactly to me what your son does to you. Trying to make me feel bad, so I'll do something different. Your choice whether you're hurt. What I was doing was giving you an example of loving and teaching. Exactly what you need to be doing with your kids. Exactly what we all need to be doing. It's the 4th step in being happy. We find love, we trust it, we remember it, and then we practice sharing it, which is what we're doing when we're loving and teaching. And we can all learn to do it. We'll see you in a week.